Hey, Seahawk fans. Welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. We're going live at the end of the Seahawks versus the New Orleans Saints game. Keith, Seattle drops it 32-39 against the Saints. They made a valiant effort, I think, on the offensive side of the ball to get back into this game late into the fourth quarter, but Seattle's defense again kind of got it in its own way as a team and failed to stop the Saints on critical running plays. Explosive plays abound against the Seahawks defense. Taysom Hill with 3 rushing touchdowns, add in a passing touchdown. Clearly their player of the game. He was the difference, but he wasn't alone. Kamara had a great game rushing. Picked up some key first down conversions, third down conversions for them, first downs, and we didn't do it on the other side. I think we were one of 13 or 14 third down conversion attempts. Gino, tried to play hero, but it just wasn't quite enough.
Yeah, I mean, Gino and Lockett, with that big touchdown that got them the lead there in the fourth wasn't enough because the defense couldn't get a stop ever. And then in the end, Gino had the ball in his hands with a chance to drive him down and win. And instead he takes a 20-yard sack that looked just about as ugly of a play from a quarterback as you'll ever see.
Yeah, that was tough. I mean, that's a guy, kind of not used to playing at the end of games, just trying to do too much, just putting really the whole thing on his shoulders. And it's hard to completely blame him. He hasn't been in a lot of those situations, at least for a long time. But he's clearly got to get the ball out there and give his team another day and not take such a big loss. But all around, there were some standout individual performances. But again, that run defense, Keith, I don't even know what to say. I don't have all the stats in front of me right at this moment. Let me pull that up really quick. So Andy Dalton went 16-24 for 187 yards, a touchdown, and interception. Tariq Woolen jumped that route and had a really nice interception on that. We can talk about that later. Taysom Hill had the one pass for 22 yards and the touchdown. I mentioned that. Rushing, Taysom Hill, 9 carries, 112 yards, 12.4 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara, 23 carries, 103 yards, 4.5 average. And then, they were just doing whatever they needed to do against us on the offensive side of the ball. They were converting third downs and not trying to do too much, but clearly just committed to running the ball against the Seahawks for over, looks like well over 200 yards in this game.
235.
And took control of the play clock. Seattle did not convert third downs very well in this game. But they did have some standout performances. Geno Smith, I thought, had an overall really decent game, but he was kind of the only guy out there, 16-25, 268 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. A little less efficient, though, than you want to see from him. But, you really can't blame him.
Over 10 yards per pass attempt.
Yeah.
And no interceptions. He didn't turn the ball over. He took the one bad sack, and he had a couple of plays where he threw the ball for 2 yards on 3rd and 6 and that kind of stuff. You can't do that. But overall, I mean,
he wasn't the reason they lost.
He was not the reason they lost. And,
right.
And, he did his job. The running game did their job. Ken Walker with 8 carries for 88 yards and that big touchdown.
That was really sweet.
8 carries for 54 yards before his injury. God, I hope he's, it's not as bad as it looks like it might be.
It's like a high ankle sprain.
Yeah. So you have, you've got that. I mean, Lockett, 5 catches, 104 yards, 2 touchdowns, including that one at the end. Metcalf,
DK Metcalf looked good.
5 for 80. He did have a couple of drops, which I think hurt, and that fumble. I didn't actually think that. I thought I thought that fumble wasn't a catch, just based on the rule, the way that he caught it and couldn't even really get down on the ground before he was losing control over it. I don't like that call. I get it. I mean, that wasn't why the team lost either. Metcalf did his part.
Yeah, a lot of the fans on Twitter are kind of reacting to some of the referee calls in this game. You mentioned that one. You talk about the pass interference thing or defensive holding against Tariq Woolen at an untimely moment that really wasn't holding at all. Tariq was just playing nice and aggressive, a little handsy, but he wasn't holding. He wasn't doing
No.
anything past 5 yards to disrupt any sort of timing or anything like that. Just
No,
kind of a bad call. But I don't
a bad
agree, though,
call.
that it made a difference in this game. A team's got to work to overcome those sorts of things in almost every game in the NFL. And I thought it was just squarely on the inability of the Seattle defense to kind of get off the field when they needed to. I will say this, though, they did create some punts in this game. This wasn't a complete washout on the defensive side of the ball, and this Seahawks offense did get the ball back. We put up a ton of points. We put up enough points to win most games. But when you give up 39 or however many it was, 39 points to any team in the NFL, you're likely going to be on the losing side of that score. And that's clearly what happened here.
Yeah, you're not going to win 48-45 very often in the NFL like
No.
Seattle did last week. You have to be a better on defense. And the 12 penalties didn't help. That was a lot of penalty yards in this game. And ultimately, the offense is trying to win shootouts because the defense is not good. And this offense, it's not ready for that. It has some explosive tendencies, and we saw in this game it had 6 plays of 32 yards or more. But ultimately, I mean, you're asking a lot for a team with a rookie running back, 2 rookie tackles, and a quarterback that's been a journeyman backup his whole career. So yeah, I mean, they just need more out of this defense.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting when you take a look at the leading tacklers in this game. Cody Barton had 12 combined tackles, 7 individual tackles. Jordan Brooks, 7 individual tackles, 11 combined tackles. But both of them were somewhat ineffective, if you really think about it. Most of those tackles were clearly past the line of scrimmage. I thought Al Woods had a good game. We mentioned Tariq Woolen. I thought he had an outstanding game, and that interception was pro level. I mean,
yeah,
the anticipation on that thing, the break on the ball, and then just reaching out and using his length to go out and secure that ball was just unreal. And that's 3 turnovers generated by him in
3
in
games.
the last 3 games. Plus, you add the block kick thing, and he's just playing outstanding.
He really is, and he continues to be the steal of this entire draft. I think if you go back right now and redraft this entire draft,
with Abe Lucas too.
Abe Lucas and Tariq Woolen are both going the first round. So he's like a shiny spot in the middle of a sea of dark, because the rest of the it's just not. It hasn't been good.
Sea of dark is putting it kindly.
Quandre Diggs we need to mention him, because this is a guy that was a free agent. The Seahawks paid to make sure to him to come back because they wanted, that veteran presence in the secondary and all that. And he's been good in the past for Seattle in previous years. He is not playing well this year. He is missing tackles. He is missing assignments.
He missed that key one against Taysom Hill. When Taysom Hill broke off that 50-plus yarder for the touchdown, it was Quandre Diggs that was playing close to the line of scrimmage. In fact, the entire defense was up in the box, trying to defend that. And as soon as Taysom got past Diggs, it was over. There was nobody behind.
Yeah, and you can't let that play get behind you like that. And as the free safety, as the last guy back, I get him coming up to make the tackle, but for him to just come up and whiff at the line of scrimmage, and then to have there's no one behind you after that.
Yeah, Barton was out there on the end, and Barton again got blocked in away from the play. Taysom just ran around him. Quandre was in that spot, but Quandre missed the tackle, and that was it. Now Woolen
Yeah.
tried to catch up to him, finally did catch up to him, but not enough to prevent the touchdown. I want to mention too today that Ryan Neal got the start over Josh Jones. I think that's about time everyone's kind of sensing that. And Ryan Neal had a real nice breakup in the end zone
Hmm.
to kind of show his skill set there.
He had a few nice plays. I'm surprised they didn't call his name more. But I think a lot of that was because he was, when he was in coverage, he had good coverage, and so the ball didn't go to his guy.
6 tackles today for him.
Yeah. So he played pretty well.
We did this too. Our defense, when they were out, Michael Thompson and Jarvis Landry out in this game, Jameis Winston out, and their offense just kind of took it to us.
And then Olave also left
in the first half. Yeah,
in the first
with
half.
a concussion.
And so they were without their top 3 receivers and their quarterback. And the Seahawks gave up 39 points.
We, when we were talking about this game in our pre-matchup show this last week, we talked about this scenario where it would be a shootout, and it was kind of a short conversation because neither of us thought that was likely. But now that I'm looking at it in retrospect and looking at it with the lens of now going through this game, I think that our defense is going to give up 30 points a game as just kind of an average. And the fact that they got 39 doesn't surprise me at all, because they're a little better than average offense, but they're not that good. And they're not that good at all. In fact, you go to pre-game stats, they're probably ranked 22nd, 23rd in the NFL in overall offense. Their defense was top 15, but they didn't show that really.
That's the part that surprised me in terms of Seattle's offensive performance. Is that it's one thing to light up the scoreboard and put up all the yards against Detroit, whose defense is genuinely bad. It's another thing to go out and do this to the Saints, because the Saints have a good, they're a good defense.
What did you think about Geno's performance and the run game overall?
Well, I think Geno's performance in the first half was like, I think I texted you.
It had a few wow moments.
It had me kind of reconsidering my stance on him a little bit, and I was wondering, like, okay, I got to make sure that I'm not letting confirmation bias affect this, because I expect him to, be mediocre. And am I just looking for that? And so I was really thinking of that. And then the second half happened. And yeah, he had the one big throw to Lockett, but that could have been picked if the safety doesn't get himself turned around. And it's just it was not a good performance in the second half. He really struggled, and this is a common theme for Seattle and its offense.
Well, I'm going to agree and disagree just a little bit. I think that they needed and required a little bit of adjustment time after halftime. I think the Saints came out and made some good adjustments to really try to focus on our run game and put Geno in a box a little bit, and they were effective at doing that. But I also thought that they later adjusted to that, and Geno made some outstanding throws down the stretch. Also some good decision making, I think, as well, both in terms of hitting the right receivers, but also holding on to the ball and not throwing into tight coverage, as the game developed, down the stretch. But that throw to Tyler Lockett at the end zone to come back and put the Seahawks in the lead at the end there was tremendous.
Yeah,
tremendous throw.
And like I said, that throw aside, because that throw was freaking amazing. It was just the rest of the second half, though, I didn't think he played that well. And it comes down, you look at that, the sack he took at the end of the game.
The sack he took is terrible.
That was bad. That was almost Russell Wilson bad in terms of sacks, because he does that sometimes. But
again, there's a player in Geno Smith right there that knows his team best and was trying to put the team on his shoulders, and sometimes I don't blame a guy for that in that situation, but you've got to make a better decision there. You've got to get the ball out, but it's so tough. It is tough.
Well, and I think what it comes down to is you know, in that situation, trying to do too much. Well, there's a reason why we haven't seen Gino with the fourth quarter comeback or any of that, winning that fourth quarter drive. He's not that guy. He needs to rely on his playmakers. He needs to let his guys go do their jobs. And we saw that Ken Walker, that amazing run in the second half that if you look at the stat sheet, it doesn't quite look like the offense got shut down like it has been in the past. You know, in the
But we
second
only went
half.
1 for 13 on third down conversions.
But yeah, well, there's that, and the you know, a lot of the second half, like that second half touchdown was all, you know, that was all Ken Walker and the running game. So there just wasn't enough. There wasn't enough from the offense in the second half to hold on to the win. And
Especially considering you're trying to keep your defense off
yeah,
the field.
and
And that's the
I'm
key.
so I'm not trying to say this is on the offense. I'm trying to say that if they're going to win, the offense has to be more efficient than that, especially in the second half, because the defense is just that bad. And Camden in the chat just said, yeah, too many sacks while retreating, and for Gino, and I would agree with that. It's one thing to take a sack, you know, stepping up into the pocket and the pocket collapses around you. It's another thing to take a sack 12 yards behind the line of scrimmage because you're running backwards, and that's just not gonna help your team in any way.
I think that's something that Gino can improve upon. I think that as you go forward in the season, you understand your physical limitations and so forth. It becomes clearer, you know, when you need to get rid of the ball and so forth. That internal clock, if you will, is going off in your head, and he's going against the best in the world. You know, Cameron Jordan was great in this game against arguably the best rookie tackle in the NFL. And he ran around him for that one sack, and then later in the game, you know, at the end was a factor too. So
yeah, but he also wasn't a factor on a lot of plays. I mean, Abe Lucas did get beat twice by Jordan. He also won a lot of those times when they were up against each other, and that just goes to show you, like, he's been so good and so unexpectedly good that a third round offensive tackle would be that good. But yeah, you're going against Cameron Jordan. You're going against one of the best in the game. And as they pointed out from the broadcast, they weren't giving him a lot of help. They weren't giving Lucas, Will Disley beside him to try and help him out. They were asking him to go one-on-one. And that, I mean, I can't say enough about how well that kid's playing.
I agree. I think he's playing better than Charles Cross is. I know, they've said that Charles Cross is going against some of the best defensive ends in the league, but you know what? There's good defensive ends on both sides of the line of scrimmage there in most games, and Abe Lucas is doing a great job. You can't take anything away from him. And their grades overall are somewhat equal. Both have a few untimely penalties here and there, giving up a few quarterback hits and hurries and so forth. But that's exactly what you're going to expect from rookies in their first season, their first 5 games in the NFL. But overall, man, you're right. You've got to hand it to them. They're doing well. I wanted to mention Boye Mafe too. Boye Mafe came out and started this game opposite Uchenna Nwasu at defensive end, at outside linebacker for the Seahawks. But I did see Darrell Taylor in there shortly thereafter on a couple of series, so I know that he was in there as well. And I thought early on they did a pretty decent job stopping the run. I thought Al Woods was outstanding initially, and forcing a lot of that stuff outside, and Nwasu and Boye Mafe and the other linebackers were out there to make plays. But over time, it seems like they just got worn down. Seattle couldn't get off the field. Our lack of being able to convert on third downs on offense, leading to punts and so forth, put our defense out there quite a bit. And we're just not that team. We're just not able to overcome that. And against a team with a challenge player like Taysom Hill, I mean, The kid can run. He makes a difference. It's crazy when you see him in person. You think, well, he's kind of a gadgety guy, but no, he's like 220 pounds, 6'2". He makes good decisions, and he takes advantage of defenses.
And he can. I mean, he's not.
And he can
He's
throw the
not.
ball.
He's not going to light up a scoreboard if you ask him to play quarterback on every play. But you have to commit an extra guy up at the line of scrimmage to try and stop him from running, and he can throw the ball good enough to beat you in that situation. So he's tough.
Boy,
He really is a tough stop for most teams, but he just ran all over Seattle.
It seemed like no matter what, they were going to gain 5 to 6 yards on any play, and with the potential to knock one out of the park, and they did. I can't remember how many big plays, explosive plays Seattle gave up today, but I guarantee you it's close to 10. And you can't give up that many big plays like that on a defense and expect to win. You just can't, even though your offense is actually scoring points pretty well. It's just too much of a deficit. You had mentioned to me, I think in a text, that you thought that we were going to lose this game. It was close to halftime, a little, maybe into the third quarter slightly.
No, it was in the third quarter. The third quarter wasn't quite over, and I was like, if we give up a score here, it feels like we're going to lose, and they did. And
then we got down by two scores, and
and
then we immediately came back and threw a touchdown pass.
And so at that point, I was like, and it wasn't. It was just I didn't trust our defense to get stops, and we needed, because if you're down 2 scores, you've got to get a couple of stops so that way your offense can have a chance to put up enough points. And they actually did. They got that big run by Walker. They got that beautiful touchdown by Lockett, and for a second there they were up by 1, but then the defense,
a second. And then they immediately came back and scored a touchdown after that.
Yeah.
Taysom Hill touchdown.
Yeah. And it just, at that point, it did seem inevitable. And then when the team ultimately lost in the end, it was so sad to be right. I wanted to be wrong there.
You and I had the same thought.
It was, I want to see this team do what it does. Run the football, not turn it over, play good defense. Except for they don't play good defense anymore. They're one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and it's just hard.
The Saints were 9 of 12 on third down conversions.
Yeah, and the Seahawks were 1 of 13.
Yeah, and that's the difference, really.
Yep.
In this game, any number of those could have been stops, and you're forcing them to punt. You're taking the ball out of their hands. You're giving it to our offense, giving Geno Smith another opportunity. I got to hand it to Geno Smith, though. Keith, this is a game that I thought would be a really good challenge for Geno. Saints defense is no slouch. They've got good edge rushers, good linebacker play. Lattimore was out there defending against Metcalf. And I thought it would just be a great challenge for this offense. And I think they kind of met that challenge. They were able to run the ball effectively. Geno Smith looked great, especially in the first half. Came back and made some good plays in the second half, enough to put his team in position to win the game.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you take a look at those factors, I'm just really proud of the way Geno is stepping up into this role this year and exceeding expectations and at least giving his team a chance every week. And that's way more than I think that we acknowledged or gave him credit for at the beginning of the year. So I'm really happy that it's kind of turned out for him that way.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that, because this is a good defensive team that the Saints have, and the Seahawks still put up over 30 points. They had the lead in the fourth quarter. They did those things, and I don't want my saying, they weren't efficient enough in third down or whatever to feel like too complaining. They did their job. The offense did its job. It's the defense that let this team down.
Those 14 points that we gave up in the third quarter and did not respond with any points of our own in the third quarter, it was the difference, because we outscored them in the fourth quarter, 13-8.
Yep.
So,
yeah. And then the other part with all of this that I think, since you brought up Geno, I do think you look at the end of the game, and you look at what happened at the end of the game, he is a good caretaker of a good offense. You can win a lot of games with a quarterback like Geno, but he also was the guy who has had many opportunities to take the team down the field and get the team the win, and has yet to do it. I equate him to Alex Smith, who drafted by the 49ers, kind of washed out there, but then ended up with Andy Reid in Kansas City and got them deep into the playoffs. But even Andy Reid knew you have to have better in order to actually get that championship. And I think this is kind of where we're at with Geno. Is he's better than I expected him to be, but I still don't think he's an answer at quarterback. He's a guy that will be a great bridge to a young player, that they can give a guy a year to learn from someone who studies the game really well, before they turn it over to a more dynamic player.
I think that that's really kind of the key that you mentioned there. I would even take it just a step further and say that this game really kind of made it more comfortable for me in my mind to actually go ahead and run Geno out next year, and that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm
But
for running him
with
back out there
maybe a
next
little
year.
bit more confidence, maybe even extending Geno now rather than later. He's going to get paid. He's going to get paid by somebody. I think he's better in a Seahawks uniform going forward, even if you give him like a 3-year deal, because that still does not prohibit you from drafting your quarterback, but it does give you a larger opportunity in the draft to let the draft fall to you. And what I mean by that is, if you're not going to pick top 5, you're going to miss out on probably the top 2 quarterbacks in this draft. But if you've got a quarterback that's going to get drafted a little later at 10 or in between 10 and 30 somewhere, you could get a quarterback with one of the 2 first-round picks that you do have. But it will also allow you to go out and you talked about this in earlier shows, get a whole bunch of defensive players with those early round picks and really
Which
make
they
a
need.
difference on your team,
Yeah.
because we need an infusion of talent, speed, and quality there that we just do not have. And allow a quarterback to come in and not have that pressure of playing right away. Have Geno, again, you mentioned it, be a bridge to that player, while still giving your team a chance to win right away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we're at with Geno Smith. And it's not a bad thing. This emergence of Geno this year is still a good thing for the franchise. It gives the franchise more options when it does come to the draft, or when it does come to free agency next year, where they don't have to myopically focus on figuring out a way to get to the top of the draft to get their quarterback. And maybe they still do that. Maybe that is the option they ultimately end up on. But this level of play does give them more flexibility to look at other positions as well.
As long as they get him extended, because right now he's set to be a free agent after this year. And so I agree with your take on, go ahead and sign him to the extension now. I would add 2 more years to it, so he gets next year and the year after. Next year he goes into the year as a starter with a rookie backup, and then if the backup's ready, he comes in and plays in year 2, and Geno goes and finds another team. And if not, then they still got Geno. So I really think that kind of should be the plan at this point. He's outperformed all expectations. He's shown that he, while limited somewhat, is still a guy that you can win with. He's still a guy that he's Alex Smith. He can take you to the playoffs. He may not win you a championship, but he can take you to the playoffs. And that is
if you're surrounded by good quality teammates.
Which he is on offense. He's not on defense. And like I say, I do think he's good enough to do that. And he provides that 2 to 3 year, counting this one, bridge to get them to a young dynamic player. But they've got to go get that dynamic player.
Yes. In a
and
draft that's possibly loaded with at least 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah, and then you look at if this team goes and goes, oh, we're going to commit to, as Camden said on YouTube, Will Anderson with that first, their first pick, and then go defense. next year, the team's going to be too good for them to get a quarterback. It's got to be this year, because you make that defense too competent, and then you are, picking 26th in the draft order, and you're
in the
never getting a
20s, right?
quarterback. Yeah, you're never getting a quarterback there. So you have to, when you have the opportunity, and you have, probably 2 top 10 picks this year, you have to make one of them count and go and get your guy.
And that's because Gino is 32 this year. He'll be 33 next year. He's not getting any younger. And this is the time. This is where you have the draft capital to do it. Doesn't mean Gino's playing bad. He's not your future. And so you've got to adjust for that. You've got to get, as you said, take the opportunity when the opportunity is sitting right in front of you. Doesn't mean the Seahawks are going to do that or go that direction, but we'll find out. I think that the conversation is we're basically saying the same thing, as that we've got options, but that option, should include signing Gino, I think, for a period of time that makes sense for all parties. And I think it makes sense for the Seahawks because he's playing well enough and now diverse enough over a 5-game stretch. Maybe you wait, a little longer, or maybe you wait until after the season, but you're going to have some competitors for sure. After this, if Gino continues to play at this level. And it looks like after a 5-game sample that this is what we're seeing now. He's actually grown as a player since we've seen him for any extended period of time. He understands his reads better. He's getting the ball out better. His timing and touch is, I just have these wow moments with him. Like, I can't believe that I'm watching Geno Smith throw the ball 30 yards down the field with that much accuracy. And so if you can lock him up for a couple of years, that gives you some options at quarterback that maybe you didn't have prior to the season beginning, where you thought for sure you were going to be in the running for a top 3 pick and you were going to go out and get one of those studs coming out of college right away. Now, as Camden said, Lamar Jackson is sitting out there in free agency. Maybe that's a move we make, or maybe it's one of the quarterbacks that are, not exactly first tier in the first 3 or 4 quarterbacks taken off the board in this draft. Maybe it's that next tier where it's, the back end of the first round or second round guys that are available as well. Because I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we pick a guy, if we don't have a defense that you can put up in the field, it's not going to be, it's going to be pretty ugly. But you mentioned that earlier. You get a Will Anderson in here, you can still have one of the greatest defensive players to come out in college football, but your defense is still crap because there's still only one Will Anderson and everyone else around him is not good. So it's a process.
Yeah, you got it. They need an overhaul of their defensive talent, and you're not going to do that unless you invest the draft capital in it, because you just can't make a big enough impact free agency wise. The costs are too much. So the Lamar Jackson comment made me think that I think a more likely scenario would be the Bears giving up on Justin Fields and sending him out, like shipping him off for like a 4th or 5th round pick, and then having a situation where you can let him, sit for a year, undo the damage that Chicago has done to him, and then give him a chance to show off his talents, because he's extremely talented, but the Bears are just getting him destroyed. They're ruining him. So
interesting, crazy. So what do you think, Keith? I'm gonna bring up our schedule really quick here for at least me, not for the audience, but the Cardinals visit the Seahawks next week. The Cardinals, up until this last game, are 2-2 as well. Then the Seahawks travel to the Chargers, the Giants coming in. The Giants were 3-1 entering this weekend. Things don't get any easier.
The Giants beat Green Bay.
Okay, so they're 4-1.
Yeah.
Wow. So 4-1 Giants come in. So that game is no longer a gimme by any means. So the schedule doesn't get any easier, is what I'm saying. And the defense is what it is. We've got a 5-game sample now. The offense is looking pretty good. I'm not so worried about that. It's kind of a role reversal. of what I was thinking heading into the season would be the case. I think everyone was kind of in that boat. Everyone thought the defense would be pretty decent going out, and the offense would really struggle. The opposite is true, but the results, I think, are going to be the same.
Yeah, I mean, at least having a good offense and a bad defense is at least more entertaining, because games that you lose, 38-31 are more fun than games that you lose 9-12.
So I get a
And
question for you.
I bring up that score because that's the last Denver Broncos score.
So with this defensive performance and struggles, and in the past, we've been able to kind of right this thing a little bit and get the defense to play better in the second half of seasons. What does this do to the idea of Pete Carroll as a coach and the decision making of Clint Hurt and Sean Desai, Carl Scott, and company, as far as their coaching, their scheme? Or is this just strictly a lack of talent, a lack of depth, and a personnel issue?
I think it's mostly a personnel issue, and it's mostly a personnel issue up front, where you've got a bunch of guys that are players that do what's good in a 4-3, trying to play in a 3-4. And like Quentin Jefferson is a great example. He's a guy that's been good at getting pressure on the quarterback in the past, and this year he has been completely ineffective at all phases. He's not built to do what the team is asking him to do. That's a problem, right? That was part of the reason why we, struggled so much in past years, was because, you've got Norton, who was trying to turn Jamal Adams into a free safety that runs around in coverage. He's not that guy, right? And they were asking players to do what they're not good at. Now they're doing a much better job of that with the secondary, but up front, they're back to that problem again. But I think it's a personnel issue, because you can't, they're trying to make this shift to the 3-4, and it takes at least a full year, 2 off seasons, to get the personnel worked out before things work out. And it's just, you have to shuffle your roster that much. Quentin Jefferson wasn't a big time signing. He wasn't a guy that was like, first tier of the free agents. He was signed later. He was brought in because they weren't able to land one of the guys that they thought could anchor the line and do that, but they still needed a guy. They still needed someone to come in and be a guy that can take some snaps and do some things and be a veteran and not make too many mistakes and that kind of stuff. So they went ahead and signed him, but he's not a good fit, and they just need another year to get all of this right.
I agree. Yeah, and and that points to the lack of depth as well. So the players that we do have here that are behind the starters are just not living up to it as well. And so it's inherent that we have problems and issues, and they're not able to make adjustments to make it any better. In fact, this game looked as bad as it's been, especially trying to defend the run. Andy Dalton's not going to kill you, and they're missing 3 of their wide receivers. So you're not really worried about that. Even then, we couldn't stop the run. Even when we're stacking 8 guys in the box, they're still beating us. They're still knocking Quentin Jefferson off the ball. They're still having Cody Barton making tackles 7 yards past the line of scrimmage. I even noticed Al Woods was about 8 yards past the line of scrimmage on one play to stop the run. He was the guy with the tackle. 8 yards past the line of scrimmage, which is just crazy. And so
good hustle for a 330-pound guy. You don't usually see that. But you don't want your 330-pound guys making tackles 8 yards past the line of scrimmage. If they're making tackles, it needs to be either in the backfield or at the line of scrimmage. Anywhere behind it, you should have your linebackers coming forward and making those plays. And you see Cody Barton backpedaling a lot. You see Jordan Brooks comes up and makes those plays sometimes, and other times he's making tackles, 6, 7, 8 yards down the field.
Right. And that's because he's got 1 or 2 double teams coming at him, and he's having to disengage blocks, and he's he's
Yep.
still fighting through that. I mean, he's not the
He's
greatest at disengaging blocks, and then, when he does, the play's past him almost, and he's doing arm tackles, and
yeah.
getting dragged for an extra 3 yards, and that's happening a lot
Yeah,
in this
he's having to
defense.
fight off a lot of guards that get to him before he can get over into the gap and make a play, and that is grounds for a good running game
I
by the other
was
team.
I was so excited to see Jordan Brooks against Kamara just lift him off the ground and plant him on that one
Yeah,
play. But think about how many plays you've seen Jordan Brooks make like that this year, where it's just a tackle in open field and solid and just boom. That was like one of the only ones I can remember. Everything
yeah,
else is an arm tackle and a reaching tackle behind the
he's
line
had
scrimmage, almost past him.
he's had a couple, but he hasn't been as good as you and I anticipated after watching him last year. Some of that has to do with, I think he is adjusting and doesn't have Bobby Wagner beside him to, make all the defensive calls and allow him to just play and not think. And I think that you've also got there's just more problems in front of him. So he's just not as clean getting through traffic.
Yeah. What are the chances we see before the trade deadline trade this year to bring in somebody to solidify that defensive line? Or do you care at this point if they're 2-3, maybe they're 2-4, 2-5 by that time, and you just kind of live with what you've got?
I think you live with what you got and you go ahead and um, you don't trade for a veteran when you're 2-5 or whatever. You play a young player, and maybe Miles
Mhm.
Adams has been bad when he's been out there, but maybe with playing time he can make some adjustments
Or
and
maybe there's some
do
other
better
practice
things.
squad player out there somewhere we can pick off.
Yeah, and just get some other guys out there. Um, I would say it's more likely that the Seahawks trade players and that Artie Burns isn't playing because that for some reason the team likes Michael Jackson a
He
bit better
just
than
he
him.
he just came in today. He was active for the first time this year.
Yeah, and he played some, but
Yeah, right.
I
Or
could
Sidney
see
Jones. What's going on with Sidney Jones? He's
one
a
of the
healthy scratch.
one of those two guys getting traded away to a team that's desperate at corner or
Especially after Trey Brown comes back.
yeah. Or Gabe Jackson, not yeah, Jackson on the offensive line. He's in the last year of
Yeah.
his deal,
Yes.
um, and they've got Phil Haynes, who's actually playing well this year, who
And
could
Jake
come in
Curhan too.
and Jake Curran, both of which could come in and take that spot at right guard. So I could see him being traded. I would see them more as sellers than buyers.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great approach, actually. All right, I think we're gonna wrap this thing up. We've stopped talking about the Saints game for the most part. There's really nothing else to say that we haven't already said. It's mostly a defensive situation now, although the offense probably could have played a little better, especially on third down. Gino tried to do as much as he could, and there were a couple players that helped him out. We saw Ken Walker have that big play. Tyler Lockett looked great again, catches everything. You mentioned it on a text that we had. He just catches everything.
He just catches everything.
Yeah. Metcalf looks good. The tackles look good. There's a lot of good things. I think Fant had a couple of great catches today.
He did.
Noticed him pop Will Disley again. But on the defense, you just really struggle beyond Tariq Woolen to come up with a player that you're really excited about, that you'd build a franchise around, that you love to see week in, week out. There just aren't any. And that's a problem because it's going to take, I think, more than just this next offseason to rebuild something that's this bad. This is more of a 2 or 3 year deal, it seems to me.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We've got enough. Oh, we've got a lot of draft capital. We've got about
You
$30
know,
million, could be 45 if you make some adjustments on the cap this next year to spend in free agency. So there's opportunities there to improve the defense, but we'll see.
yeah, I think while there's no guys that are like super excited to build a team around, I do think there's talent. I think that Brooks may not have us jumping up and down and being excited the way Tariq Woolen is, but he's still a guy that he holds the franchise record in tackles.
I think you need to pair him though with a better linebacker.
Yeah, you gotta pair him with
You got to
someone
give him
that's
some
not
help
Cody
up front.
Barton, and
Yeah,
you gotta put someone in front of him. But you've got him. You've got Kobe Bryant, who has started out the year kind of rough, but has played better, played pretty good today, including a forced fumble. And so there are some other things that you can work with. Boye Mafe is another one. You've got guys. It's not like you find 11 new starters, or if you count Woolen, 10 new starters. I think you need 6 if you want to be a good defense, 4 if you want to be average, and that's not unheard of when you've got 5 picks in the top 70.
that's true. And a little bit of money to spend. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I think they can do it. It's gonna take some focus. It's gonna take some time, and there's no quick fix. This year is kind of what it is. We're 2-3. That's probably 1 win more than I thought we'd have at this time, Keith. You'd kind of been in this range.
It was one win more than you predicted on our prediction show. It's exactly what I predicted in our prediction show.
Right. And so we kind of are what we are.
Yeah.
We're between a 5 and 6 win team, but these games where we're evenly matched or slightly worse off roster wise, they're going to be close games, and we could end up on the losing end. And I think it happened today. I kind of predicted a loss. You predicted a loss, and we lost. I'm not trying to say, yay, I was right. Opposite. I don't feel good about that. It's like I'm predicting that just sheer out of necessity, because it is what it is. I'm trying to be realistic, but the team is showing promise in certain areas, and other areas, man, it's a dumpster fire. It just is what it is. So anything else, Keith?
No, I think we've wrapped this up. Let's flush this game, and we got our midweek show. We'll figure out what we're going to talk about with that, and then get ready for the next one.
Sounds good. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NWC Hawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. Find us on your favorite podcast platform. We're all over the place: Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, etc. And then you can find us on our YouTube channel at Seahawks Playbook. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.